Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of the Burning Question series powered by Fantasy Football Scout. In this series, Harry and I, Sonaldo, talk about the key hot topics for the week. Game week 1 is nearly in the books. We are recording this live before the United game tonight. So United players still have to play, but lots to digest. It's been an exciting game week 1 to say the least. So much eventful events as well. The whole Gabriel situation. It's been fun. Harry, how are you doing, my friend? You're muted.
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's nice to have the football back, isn't it? FPL as well, but it's always nice to be sitting and spending your weekends watching football. So I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Mixed feelings about game week 1. It's a decent start, but compared to, let's say, the majority of engaged managers, I'm a little bit behind because I still have a couple of points that were unfortunately not in the last few minutes of the deadline. So that's how I feel. But I'm very excited with the team setup moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. We got very similar teams, and we'll go through them. I'm pretty pleased with a lot of the decisions that I made. Goalkeeper being one of them. Sadly, I went with Pickford in the end, but yeah, generally I'm pretty pleased with how things are looking.
Yeah, I feel like game week 1 or the post game week 1 is really difficult to discuss much on because our teams are already so well set up for the first few game weeks, and most managers are probably going to roll into the next game week. We still have an open mind that you could still use a transfer for certain players, especially if you have money in the bank. So it'd be an interesting discussion today. For today's agenda, guys, we'll do a game week review. Run through the fixture ticker from game weeks 2 to 7, I believe. So the next 6 game weeks. Then we'll be talking about, pretty much each of the games. And while we talk about the games, maybe discuss the main questions that arises with each game. So feel free to, put in your questions in the chat so we can discuss it while we talk about certain teams. At the end, we do want to do sort of a Newcastle and Spurs section because there are two teams that we have a lot of questions on. Of course, we'll be talking about Chelsea as well, including Liverpool. And then basically one bus team at the end since our teams are so similar, and then a Q&A if we have time. So that's kind of the idea of today's agenda. But
Cool.
before we move on, Harry, I do need to do a quick plug, guys. So Scout is still doing a 30% extended sign up for, I believe, the next week or two. So really, really important for you guys to notice if you really want to join FFScout. There's so much good content there, so many good articles, and again, we are powered by them. So without the help of Scout, we wouldn't have this platform to do this pod as well as the other pods and content on the YouTube channel. So please do support FFScout if you can. So that was my quick plug. And we move straight into the foreseeable fixtures from game weeks 2 to 7. Harry, why don't you take it away and tell us what we have here?
Yeah, so I think it's just always useful when we start talking about teams and who to transfer in. I'm a big fixtures person. I know some people think, form over fixtures, but I think it's always useful to have a quick review before we dive into each team of who has the nice fixtures that you'd potentially want to be targeting and potentially those lower down that you maybe want to be avoiding. Now, there isn't that much change because we spent, months looking at this going into game week 1. So I feel like most of us know this quite religiously now to this point, but there are a couple of changes when compared to game week 1. So a couple of teams who do shoot up the rankings, you start to see both Brentford, Liverpool, and Chelsea all being higher up the rankings than they were when you looked at this going into game week 1. So Chelsea, of course, had that Liverpool fixture in game week 1, which did knock down their fixtures. Whereas if you look at them now, West Ham away, Luton at home, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Aston Villa, Fulham as their next 6 game weeks is very nice for them, sitting number 1. Brentford as well had Spurs in their first one, but they now have Fulham, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth. Then they go away to Newcastle before Everton at home and Forest away. Really nice there. And then Liverpool as well. That Bournemouth at home fixture in game week 2. One that I feel like we've all been sort of having an eye on a little bit. But yeah, definitely a one to target. The team that drops down a little bit. So Manchester United and Brighton both drop a little bit further down. So they're in the mid of this sort of graphic. Brighton, of course, had Luton at home in game week 1, which helped boost their difficulty rating, and Manchester United had Wolves at home, which again boosts their difficulty rating. Those two teams do fall a little bit lower down, but their fixtures in the sort of next two are still nice.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I think it's always good to take a look at the fixture ticker every game week, even though we know what's ahead of us. I think the ones that really stand out to me, Harry, is Chelsea in game week 3. Game week 1 was proof that Pochettino came out swinging. He's got plans in his back of his mind. Casado coming in, it's going to be a totally
Yeah.
different team. Enzo was absolutely fantastic. I'm looking at Jackson as a potential game week 3 person that or striker that can come into my team. I know you had worries about whether Chelsea might sign a different striker, so we'll get there too. Spurs,
Yeah.
very interesting. Game week 3 to 5. There's an opportunity here for us to somehow fit Madison into our teams. I think the Brighton fixtures start to get dodgy from game week 3 as well. So maybe those are the assets that we can lean off of or leave or lose. But if we don't have or have fewer Brighton assets, it's an advantage for us moving forward potentially. And then the Villa one's very tricky, and Newcastle as well, because both teams, even though Villa got absolutely hammered, I still thought they're a really good team. And Villa Newcastle with the difficult fixtures, whether they are valuable assets or viable assets, is also a question we should be asking ourselves. So very interesting couple of game weeks coming up before the eventual wild card. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's interesting. One you mentioned on Brighton, and just to go, on that game week review, we didn't pick very many Brighton assets on it. And one of the decisions I look at that I think I've got right, looking at the points, not necessarily in hindsight, because Brighton could have scored several goals, is like Mbuemo and Watkins, who we went with, actually matched Mitoma and João Pedro combined, which was sort of the alternatives. And they had their Luton at home fixture, whereas Mbuemo had his Spurs fixture, and then Watkins had his Newcastle away fixture, had their most difficult fixtures, whereas those Brighton assets have used up their best fixture on paper at home to Luton. Still think they'll do damage against Wolves and West Ham, but yeah, pretty pleased with how that swing has gone given the fixtures in game week 1.
It's very interesting you say that because I was thinking the same thing when Watkins got his assist. Because obviously you want more than an assist from your forward, but
Yeah,
I thought it was very good coverage for what Pedro
yeah.
produced because Pedro could have really done much. I think he could have gotten another goal, looked really, really good, focal point of the attack, and Newcastle obviously really great team. But I thought Watkins and Diaby both played excellent, even though they lost 4-1 or 5-1.
Yeah, interesting. They, of course, are without Buendia and likely to be without Mings as well. But we'll dive into Villa in a little bit.
Sounds good. Okay, so I guess we go straight to game week review.
Yeah, yeah. So game week 1's a little bit different. There's less to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, but less reliable things to talk about. So we're going to spend just a little bit more time actually just reviewing the games and reviewing a few of the key teams that we are wanting to target. We can start off at the top. The Friday night game, Manchester City 3, Burnley 0. It was, of course, the Erling Haaland show once again. He got his 2 goals. He got maximum bonus points as well. What a way for him to start the season, and all those 6 games for Manchester City without a goal or whatever it was. Very quickly went quiet again when he came back with a brace there. Again, I don't think we need to talk about him very much. He was really impressive. He can score goals in any position. He can score goals whoever he's up against as well. I think there's a couple of things to talk about on this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. First of all, are the defenders. Of course, John Stones missed out. He has a very slight thigh injury, I think. And then Ruben Diaz missed out through concussion. And there was a wholesale changes at the back. And then, of course, we've seen Kevin De Bruyne pick up an injury in that game. It sounds like he's going to be out for a minimum of several weeks. It looks like we won't see him featuring in September at the earliest. So he should be back October or later. What does that do to the likes of Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden, 2 players who I now have my eye on as a result? So where do you want to start? Attack or defense?
I think we start defense because I actually don't think much changes in defense, even though you just mentioned the Stones situation. They do have a midweek game against Sevilla, I believe, so maybe we'll get a little bit more information on what's going on. But we had the same conversation and questions last week, Harry. Is our City defense reliable? And sort of the conclusion we came to is, yeah, if you're betting on them getting 3 out of 5 starts or 4 out of 5 starts, 5 being a sample size. Last year, this is a very good, interesting graphic I found last year, Harry, where so this basically shows all the Premier League teams from last season, You don't really have to deep dive into the chart itself, but it's a percentage of how much rotation each team did. And you can see Arsenal at the very top. So Arsenal was the team with 86.8% stability, basically very, very little rotation within that team, which also we'll get to eventually, but we must sort of alter our thinking of Arsenal rotation. We've seen game week one, Gabriel coming off. We see Havertz coming to the team. Trossard is now a viable option at all times. So there's going to be more rotation there. Newcastle is second in terms of stability, but way, way at the bottom is Chelsea and Man City. And Chelsea, I think, is going to be a little bit different this year with the amount of signings they have, but Man City, or amount of changes they have. But Man City, we've always known this, is such a rotation risky team, and there's proof here in this model itself. So my idea of going to a Man City defender is quite frightening. I'm not very comfortable going to Stones at this point in time. Gvardiol is interesting just because he's so cheap. So he might present himself an option, but even then, it's like very risky in terms of rotation. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Looking at this graphic is interesting because I would expect Chelsea and Newcastle to see a bit of a switch this year because, of course, Newcastle have Europe this season and Chelsea don't, whereas it was the opposite last season. So I am expecting a bit more from Newcastle and a bit less from Chelsea. Manchester City, yeah, their defense is interesting. If I knew Ake, Akanji, both also 5 million, if I knew they were going to play every week, Kyle Walker as well, it was great. But I think we've seen as well, there are enough other good defenders in and around that price who are going to start every week that if you have a John Stones, I would wait for an update later on in the week. And if he is going to play Newcastle and then the following fixtures as well, if he's going to be back, I would probably hold on to it. I don't think using a transfer on John Stones right away is needed. Wait for a little bit more. But I just wouldn't be buying, I don't think.
Yep. Agree with you there. This, by the way, is from 538.com. So credit where credit is due. It's from 538.com.
Cool. So the next one is the attack. And I mean, I said in the first podcast, I think we did, we want to spend less time saying, well, it depends on minutes. And maybe this is something that's going to mean we don't have to say that quite as much. So De Bruyne does look like he's out for a couple of weeks. So it is particularly Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden are the two that maybe people are looking out for an increase in minutes off the back of it that might make them a good asset. Of course, Foden, a 7.5 million midfielder, but Alvarez, a 6.5 million forward, especially with us having space in our forward line, could be very interesting. Foden played on the left in this game, which was a surprise given we all expected Grealish to play as many games as he can. Haaland, of course, through the middle. I think Bernardo Silva out on the right, Foden in the 8 as well. So I do think it definitely boosts both of their appeals. I like Alvarez off the back of it much more than I like Foden, because if he does want to play Foden, if he wants to play Foden out on the left, he's still competing with Grealish. But I think Alvarez's position in that sort of role in midfield where De Bruyne plays, I don't think anyone does it as well as closely to De Bruyne does as Alvarez does.
Yeah, I think to echo some of your thoughts, I would still wait on this till at least next game week. Get a little bit more information. Watch the Sevilla game. Watch the weekend Premier League game. We've seen that Alvarez is really, really into Pep's initial plans. Things might change throughout the course of the season, but in preseason, he's been starting alongside Haaland nonstop. He started this game, the first game of the Premier League. He started in the Community Shield. I mean, there's something going on where Pep is really considering Alvarez into his plan. So genuine potential, very high, risk. There is risk, but the reward is very high if you do go for a, 7.0 starting striker for City. There always
6.5.
6.5. There you go. There's always the caveat that he is that price for a reason. If you have 5 games, how many starts you're going to get. That's sort of the game we play with Foden and Alvarez. So my thoughts echo with what you're thinking. Foden, I still think I would like to watch a little bit more because, as explosive as he is, it's not like, I'm starting to come to the point where do I really feel like he's going to be worth the risk and get me returns? I mean, this game sort of showed Foden had glimpses of, his potential, but also not that much, if you know what I mean. So Yeah,
Yeah.
get cooling on
Yeah.
Foden a bit without being too
Yeah.
reactionary.
Yeah. Alvarez is an interesting one. I do think he's much less impactful when he plays in that De Bruyne role compared to when he plays instead of Haaland. Now, of course, that should be the case because he's not playing up front, but the returns are much less consistent when he plays in the sort of 8-10 role compared to when he plays up front. So although I think his minutes will be really good, I the returns are not as consistent when he plays in that role. So I would definitely like buying a City player when they've got Newcastle at home, given how Newcastle just performed, feels like we don't need to do that. So I would wait for those 2 games and then target them game week 3.
Yeah. For the select few that might still have a City defender, most likely Stones in their team, or maybe even Diaz, would you make the switch to Chilwell? I mean, we'll get to the Chilwell talk eventually.
Yeah, so I actually posted this on Twitter, and I actually think this season rolling a transfer. So normally rolling in a transfer into game week 2 is really important and much more important than price changes and making an early transfer. But I actually think this season it is less important than we've had in previous years, and the reason for that is our teams are so well set up for game week 3 and game week 2, but the amount of people needing a transfer to actually go into game week 3 is really small. Like I look at my team in game weeks 2 and game weeks 3, and I don't know where I'm going to use my transfer. So actually, if you have a transfer you need to make this week, like Stones, and you want to go to Chilwell, I would be absolutely fine with that because actually going into game week 3, there aren't transfers we need to make then because a lot of the fixture groups that we had was 1, 2, 3. So loads of teams are just still set up absolutely fine. So if you have a Stones and you want to sell him, I wouldn't worry too much about rolling a transfer if you know you because Stones is likely to drop, Chilwell is likely to rise. You do need to consider that sort of stuff early on in the season as well.
Good point. It sounds like I'm pretty low, so maybe I need to give me 1 second, guys. Does this sound better?
It sounds
No,
loud.
it's like echoing. Okay, I'll just speak closer to the mic. Hopefully it balances it out. All right.
Next game.
Mhm.
Cool. Arsenal Forest went
Ooh.
as sort of as we expected as a result until about 80 minutes. And then Forest did look really good to finish the game. Was definitely impressed by Awani and Elanga, both coming off the bench for them. But focus really on Arsenal on this one. The front 4 changed a little bit. So we saw, or front 5 actually, because we saw Nketiah start, which was a bit of a surprise, but I think they looked better for it. Havertz looked better for it, playing in that sort of midfield role. It was harder for the defenders to track him. He had a little bit more space, a little bit more time. Martinelli with a great assist. Still don't know whether actually he meant it or not. Bukayo Saka with a great goal. So I think Saka and Martinelli look like really nice assets. Havertz and Odegaard, I still personally wouldn't be going there. I don't think Odegaard is as good when he plays in a midfield 2 with Havertz. I don't think he gets into the same positions as he did last season. So if I was an Odegaard owner, I wouldn't be selling, but I'd be a little bit more concerned than maybe if I had Martinelli.
Yeah, I mean, just on terms of Odegaard, it's like a twofold because you want to sell. You wouldn't be as confident in the compared to Martinelli, for example. But again, very small sample size, just 1 game week. The good thing about having Odegaard is potentially you have the player you want to sell in order to fund a different midfielder by the time game week 3 comes. Whereas for you and I, Harry, like next game week, who are we going to sell? I want to keep Mbeumo, for example. Who are we going to sell to get to, let's call it Madison? And Odegaard to Madison becomes an easy move if you don't feel Odegaard is performing to the standard that you want him to. So, yeah, that was my thinking.
Yeah, I
there.
agree. Yeah, because you don't want assets that are not performing, but it makes it easier to know who to sell. When we have a midfield of Fernandes, Martinelli, Rashford, Saka, and Buemo, it's very difficult to highlight who we're going to have to sell if we do want a James Maddison in our teams.
I think attack, there's really not much to talk about. If you have Martinelli, Saka, you keep. And Nketiah, still not convinced yet.
No.
Trossard, no. Havertz, no, as you mentioned. If you have them, keep them for sure. Wait 1 more week.
Yeah.
The key question, I guess, is defense. Gabriel, right?
Yeah. So, of course, missed out on Saturday morning Arteta said it was, well, he was on the bench, so it was tactical reasons. Timber got injured and Gabriel did not come on. It could have had a change in shape, but they brought on Tomiyasu instead. If the question arises is he's played 73 games in a row before that game. Do we expect him to come back in and come back in consistently? Or is this going to be a theme that we see enough that it makes him a risk of an asset? I mean, I would start by saying if I own Gabriel, I would 100% be keeping him because I think he'll come back in. But I do think there's some systems where maybe they want to keep the ball and control games more, then maybe he's less important to.
Yeah, as a Gabriel owner, what happened, but I do have to keep him. I think that's the right move. I mean, I already have Chilwell in place, so that move is not. Maybe the question is like, if you don't have Chilwell, do you do Gabriel to Chilwell? But I think we keep him for one more season. And I go back to this graphic, guys, where it's a good example of Arsenal being the most stable in terms of rotation last year. This is the more specific view of what Arsenal's rotation looked like last year. There's some Gabriel Jesus in the middle. There's that empty space where he got injured. And it was sort of a like-for-like replacement last season. You can see that Gabriel Jesus in the middle got injured, and then Eddie Nketiah came in to fill in that, gray area or the white area. But this year's a bit different, right? I think this year there's more players that can play multiple positions. And the same thing goes for defense. Arteta is going to want to switch things around. They finished second with this sort of formula, so they need to do some differences from what they've done last season, which I think rotation comes into the equation and, different tactical setups, whatever it may be. So I just want to kind of seed that into you guys' minds that maybe Arsenal assets aren't as locked in terms of stability as we might once have thought last season. So, but for now, I think the simple FPL answer to Game Week 2 is let's keep Gabriel, see what happens this weekend. Would you agree?
I would agree. My only question is, if you have Gabriel sat in your team now and you don't have Chilwell and you have only 0.5 billion in the bank, presumably this time next week or even this time on Thursday, you won't be able to make that transfer. Chilwell from Game Week 3 does look like a much better asset, if particularly his positioning, although we'll get on to Chelsea. We did play a back five. I don't expect that every week. Would you, in that situation where you're going to want to go to Chilwell and you're going to be priced out of it, would you consider the move then? Palace away in Game Week 2.
Yeah. These questions are tough, man. These questions are like, we have the responsibility to give our honest opinion, but also you don't want to just blurt out random stuff. And I thought about this for a day at least. And if I was in that position, I would be afraid to lose an third Arsenal spot, as well as an Arsenal defensive coverage, because Arsenal can get clean sheets. But it is Ben Chilwell, right? He was probably one of top 3, if not the most standout FPL picks from Game Week 1. And as long as he stays fit, he's an essential player, essentially. So the trade-off is this. If it was any other player besides an Arsenal defensive spot, I would think less about it. But because it is losing Arsenal defensive coverage, that's the only thing that holds me back from making that move, especially with 0.5 and a likely price increase very soon. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'd probably do it. And the reason for it is because the fixtures for Chelsea are not just a couple of weeks. 3 to 8, they play Luton, Forest, Bournemouth, Aston Villa at home, Fulham and Burnley. If you don't buy Chilwell, you will spend your time wishing you had him, not just for 1 or 2 weeks, but that is a 6-game week period, much more than I think Gabriel will be the same. When you look at their fixtures, Chelsea's are better from here on out. So as much as I hate it, I would have an eye on the value as well. Chilwell likely to go up. Gabriel may go down as well. That's, not just a 0.1 swing, that's, 0.2 swing there. As much as I'd hate to be selling Gabriel in Game Week 2, I just think if you haven't started with Chilwell, it could be an easy, excuse and route to go and get him.
Okay, I have a different question. How about for us sad Gabriel owners that we
Yeah.
know he's going to drop in price? Harry, what would your advice or thinking be here?
Yeah, I would only sell him if there's a defender you absolutely know you want. And I think that only really falls into Chilwell
Yeah,
and maybe a Stupinan.
yeah.
So if
Because
you started without one of those two, then maybe. But apart from that, I don't think I would.
yeah, because I was thinking like maybe you can get ahead of the two transfers in game week 3, where again the power of two transfers is amazing, right? Maybe there's a move where you can fund Gabriel down and then have some more money and just make that one move up next week. But I think information is going to be more powerful than rushing this transfer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm. Cool.
Okay, cool. Moving on.
Moving on.
Oh, by the way, Forest actually, it was a weird game because Forest XGC was top 3, I believe, this game week. So they did pretty
Yeah.
well defending. It didn't feel like it, but they weren't too bad defending. So which
Yeah.
brings us to, I guess, starting Turner this game week. Are you there?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, there was talk from Ten Hag about he quite likes having Henderson as part of the squad. So we might get to the end of the transfer window and Turner remains as their number one.
Yeah.
Does Turner really want to move from Arsenal being back up there to being back up at Forest? It doesn't necessarily make loads of sense. So maybe it will be that he's first choice.
Yep. Nice. Okay. There's a lot of
Cool.
questions and super chat. We'll get to it at the end, guys.
Perfect. Bournemouth, West Ham, not loads to talk about it. Bowen was a game week 1 differential that not many people went with. He did get a goal. And I suppose the other thing to add here is there was a start in goal for 4.0 Areola. It did come out of the blue. We thought it might happen in preseason, and then he played virtually none of preseason. And then game week 1 turns up and Areola's in goal. There's not that much to say. I wouldn't be buying him yet because we don't know if that's a long-term choice. I'd
Mhm.
wait and see if a couple of weeks, especially because their fixtures are not good enough to be starting a West Ham goalkeeper in. But if you have him, you may well have lucked out in a great keeper for the season.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah.
You're on
Yeah.
mute.
Yeah. Sometimes the less info, the better, almost. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, this is how FPL works. The less info, the better. Because if
Mm,
you weren't aware of Turner, you probably kept Areola. And now you have a West Ham starting keeper potentially. So good on you guys.
yeah.
Okay.
Anything else to add on this game?
I mean, Bowen's likely to play striker, right? This season, it seems like there was
Yeah.
quotes about Moya saying Bowen played number 9 at Hull City, I believe. So I don't know if that's where he came from, but his previous team. So there's that
Yeah.
experience he has as a number 9, and we know that they're not making a lot of signings. We know that, um, you know, they're injury prone up top as well. So potentially, when the fixtures turn, Bowen becomes a really suitable asset for us because we know how good he is. We think
Yeah.
about 2 seasons ago, but right now it just doesn't make sense with the fixtures.
Yeah. Well, exactly. They are fourth bottom for fixtures. They play Chelsea, Brighton, Luton, Man City, Liverpool in their next 5. Those Luton and Brighton games both being away from home as well. So I think he could be a great option, but not right now.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Ward Prowse, Linus K says Prowse
Yes.
also is part of West Ham. I think the signing happened today, just in case you guys didn't know.
Yes. Yes. Don't. I mean, I think it's good for if we ever get to the point of owning a defender, because he loves a set piece, and they are a good aerial side, West Ham, but it's not one for FPL yet. I don't think.
Have you ever gone there, by the way?
I think in like a free hit scenario, not in my normal team. I don't think so.
Yeah, because the way I view quarter kicks and free kicks and bullet headers, let's call it, is it's so random. Like it's
Yeah.
really hard to predict in a short
Yeah.
5 game span. It's more like you have them for a certain 10 plus game weeks and then maybe you get
Yeah.
one or two.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Brighton next, maybe one there's a little bit more to talk about. Well, they did what Brighton do. They create a lot of chances, missed some of them, scored some of them, and then, as we saw for quite a lot of time last season, they did leak a goal. There's no clean sheet there. Um, I feel like the player for me to call out, Pervis Stupinan, incredible game. 5 million for him this season is going to be. There's no way he finishes this season at 5 million. He'll be much more, I think. Yeah, an incredible game for him. Of course, got the assist very late on. Could have had assists earlier on in the game as well. Definitely someone I would not want to go the start of the season without. The attack was interesting. It did what we expected it to in share points. So 4 different goal scorers for them. I think 4 different players picking up assists as well. So yeah, I'm quite happy I actually avoided it because I think there's so much going on there. They're a great team and will score goals, but it's hard to predict where those points are going to come from.
Yeah. I think it's good we're trying to keep it concise. We don't need to over talk about a team that we're not going to do anything about this game week. Next game week, Brighton becomes much more interesting as a team to talk about. The one thing I do agree with you as Stupinan, if you look at XGI for this first game week, up top is Joe Pedro and Buemo, and then you go down the list and you have a defender and a Stupinan being top 10 in terms of XGI, which is absolutely mental, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I guarantee everybody has him, but he's a potential long-term hold, but he could also be an opportunity to jump off maybe game week 3 or 4, where everyone will likely continue to have him because he's playing so well. So interesting there. I would like to say that, good on you, Joe Pedro owners. I felt like I saw it in the preseason. I just didn't have the not guts, but I just ended up being on walk-ins. But it's good that you guys got off to a good start where you needed him to score. He could have gotten much more higher returns, but there's going to be an influx of forwards that arises. So what you do with him in the coming weeks will be a very interesting discussion to be had as well.
He played a lot more minutes than we thought he would as well.
Yeah,
I think he went 80 plus, which was a surprise. Whether that will happen every week, we don't know. But yeah, was definitely a positive for him. Of course, he took the penalty. People saw Milner on the pitch and wondered if he wouldn't, but he still took it. So I think that's fairly assured that he will be their penalty taker. I feel like I've spent the past 6 months of playing FPL being annoyed with Brighton getting penalties because I didn't have McAllister last season and now I don't have João Pedro this season. That Brighton seem to get so many penalties and I never have the person taking them. But yeah, they're all a hold. I think I wouldn't be buying new. I think is my position on Brighton unless it's a Stupinan and you don't have him, then I would consider buying.
Yeah, it's the classic case of knee-jerking versus committing to your pre-game week 1 plan. And if you don't have João Pedro, it is a good exercise to hold on to not buying him because the fixtures are going to turn. And there are emerging assets in Jackson as well that could potentially, overtake him as a better pick in the coming weeks. Mitoma? Actually, we should talk about Mitoma maybe.
Yeah, he had a good game. He was quite wide at times, which I think is, expected with the way he plays. And March is more central compared to where Mitoma plays. He did have a good game, though. He is a very, talented footballer. He got the assist for the first goal, I think. So again, I think he's a good option. I think I would definitely hold him. But what we said at the start of the season is, those other midfielders, the likes of Mbeumo and Eze, have so many more routes to points. So if you have Mitoma, I would definitely keep him for the next couple of fixtures. But I don't think I'd be buying new on him.
Yeah, I think he's a similar situation to the Odegaard talk we had earlier, where who do they play next game? Brighton? Wolves. So you keep him for Wolves. You potentially keep him for West Ham. And then he's your guy that you can move on. But he's not too bad. I do agree with you in the sense that I'm happy I went Mbeumo over him because Mbeumo just looked more threatening and more routes to points. And then maybe you have the potential to fund a James Maddison move in game week 3 when the time comes.
Yeah, cool. Everton, Fulham, there's not much to talk about. Pickford lost his clean sheet, but I would still hold your nerve on him. Yeah. And then Sheffield United, Crystal Palace. Eze, the talking point here was any owners of Eze were incredibly unlucky not to get anything. There were penalty shouts, there was open play threat, there was set pieces. I think he had 0.99 expected goal involvements this week, which for him to come away with nothing just is very unfortunate if you went with him. I would, again, like Mitoma, sorry, he's a definite keep for me. I think the returns will be there. Everything seemed to flow through him in that game.
Yeah, it's the brutal, harsh swings of FPL, and because essentially it's not whether Eze got his points or not; it's whether Eze got his points compared to the other slots in Mbuemo, Mitoma, Madison. Maybe I'm blanking out on one more, but yeah, all of them returned except
Yeah,
Eze. So that's the loss there.
yeah,
There is the structural talk as well, whether you had Salah or not. But if you do a direct one v one comparison, that's the pain that you probably had this weekend. But
yeah,
again, you have Eze in place for a certain amount of time, so you just have to be patient and hope that those returns even out, or as it gets ahead of the other players that when we hold them for a long time, or when we do hold
yeah,
them.
yeah. Cool. We will jump past Newcastle Villa and Brentford Spurs. We'll come back to those at the end. Chelsea Liverpool. Chelsea lined up with a back three. I do not think that'll be the case once Caicedo and, by the looks of it, Lavia both come in. I think there's too many midfielders there for us to not play with a back four, which I do think will impact the likes of Chilwell a little bit. So those seeing Chilwell playing up front, we might see it a little bit less, but I still think Chilwell is a great option. Reece James will also be a very good option as well. I'm a big fan of both of them.
Nice.
Um, Levi Colwill was so impressive. I cannot see us playing without him there. Very, very impressed at a 4.5 for him. Um, and then up front, I suppose, is the other place. Midfielder wise, I still don't think there's any. Even the wingers, I don't want to touch at the moment. And then Jackson up front, good option. His first touch was a little bit weak, let him down a little bit, but in a game, but like a game against Liverpool, wasn't always going to get that time. I would still be considering going Jackson for game week 3, I think.
Wow, very interesting. This whole Caicedo drama with Liverpool has been fun to watch, and it seems like both teams. I think this game was proof that both teams need that DM, because as good as Enzo is, Caicedo just helps Enzo even enhance his
Yeah.
abilities even more. Chelsea with 65% possession, so they did really control the game. We never expected Poch to come out with a five at the back with two of your potentially best players in Reece James and Chilwell being really involved.
Yeah.
I think Reece James he had very high XA actually, even though he was playing deeper than where Chilwell was playing. So don't let your sort of eyes fool you. Reece James is also a fantastic option. I think his injury is supposedly just tiresome. So
Yeah.
I would be very hopeful that he's fine. Chelsea super high line, a lot of pressure up front. Caicedo is going to help, sort of block those counters when they come back. I thought Gallagher played well. Enzo, for me, man of the match for Chelsea. I mean, what else? Like, it's a team that I'm very excited about. We don't want to get too excited with one game. And remember last game week, we were talking about how we feel great about Chilwell as an option because there's going to be
Yeah.
space for him against Liverpool. And that's exactly what we saw today. They play a
Yeah.
super wide. I think you guys play super wide, Harry. Like the width of the pitch is super wide. And a lot of times Enzo or Reece James would switch it to Chilwell. Chilwell would find Enzo. Enzo would switch to James. So you guys are just going back and forth, creating space, creating half space chances. It's very exciting football. And Poch just knows the Premier League really well. So my hopes are high for Chelsea to have very good
Yeah.
assets by the time next week game comes around.
Yeah. So Chilwell, James, Jackson, I still think are watch list players ones to consider buying. Colwill as well. Sanchez in goal, 4.5. It looks like Kepa is off. I would be a little bit cautious, but while the transfer window is still open, he was very weak with the ball at his feet in that game
I remember.
yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible, the way Chelsea are throwing money around once again, that there is a consideration of another goalkeeper. I think it's unlikely, but I would say there's a 25% chance that we go in for another goalkeeper. So I would be wary of that.
Yeah, I'm not even close to where Sanchez is personally. I remember that chance. I think it was in the second half where he sort of kicked the ball out and Liverpool,
Yeah.
took the chance and thankfully there was no goal. But Yeah, that was his problem at Brighton, just really bad with the ball at his feet.
Yeah.
And, you guys are going to need to build up from the back. So Sanchez just doesn't sit well with me right now. Maybe Kepa
Yeah.
rotation is there lurking in the background as well. So wait and watch in terms of Chelsea keeper, even though people are excited about having a 4.5 keeper.
Yeah. Kepa looks like he's off to Real Madrid, so it might leave us with no other keeper. In
Okay,
that case, then he'll become popular. But yeah, cool.
interesting. Yep.
Liverpool.
Yeah, but before we go, guys, there's almost 1,000 of you guys in the chat, which is crazy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Feels like everyone's excited about FPL returning. Please do hit the like button. It really, really
Yeah.
helps us. We really need your support there. Subscribe to the Scout channel, and then we also have 30% membership discount still going for the rest of the week. So, thank you guys for joining us today. With that being said, let's go to Liverpool.
Yeah. Liverpool's interesting. I mean, again, it's predicting the front four. We saw Salah come off early, which was very surprising, threw a little bit of a tantrum and a strop as he was taken off, which the crowd very much enjoyed. Luis Diaz looked good, but the front four generally were, if we include Gakpo there, were all quite quiet, actually. Darwin looked the best when he came on off the bench, but the rest of them, it was pretty quiet, to be honest. I was very surprised about how little that front four got into the game after about the first half hour, which they were very good in the first half hour. And then we were good for for that last 50 minutes of the first half. And then the second half, there was just no real moments where they got a foothold in it, which I was surprised at, which I think led to the Salah subbing because he wasn't that involved. So the big question we all have, two questions, is A, if you have Mo Salah, do you captain him against Bournemouth? And B, if you don't have a Liverpool tacker, do you buy any of them against Bournemouth?
So we start with the Salah question. I don't know how pretty our Salah owner is sitting. It's tough, right? Because Holland scored 2 goals with very, very low XG. So he basically overperformed. And we just know about this is just what Holland does. Even against a very, very good Newcastle team, the potential is always there for him to even haul, right? So
Yeah.
that's what you're up against. You're up against a 90% owned Holland at this point in time. And 90% owned Holland usually means, if he does well, it's going to be tough for you to recover those points later. But again, you committed to this idea of having Salah for game week 2. You saw the signs in game week 1. He looked really good. He looked sharper than what we expected from the end of last season. And yeah, I think you just have to stick to captaining Salah this game week, no doubt about it. How about yourself?
Yeah. I think I probably would if I had him.
Mm.
I would hate to do it and I would sit behind a sofa for that Manchester City game, but yeah, I think I would do it.
Yeah, we just can't predict this next game. Even though they played well in game week 1, it's not enough of a sample size to say they're going to play well against Bournemouth.
Yeah.
The fixture says so. The fixture said so, but playing against Chelsea opens up the game a bit more, potentially against a Bournemouth that's going to sit back deep. How are they going to crack that nut is going to be the question.
Yeah.
Chelsea played super, super high. There's going to be chances for Mo Salah. He does best against the counter, right? Or on the counter. So, yeah. Good luck
Cool.
to
I
you
suppose
guys. Mm.
you said, it's all about predicting the next game. On that, I will not be buying a Liverpool attacker into my team, A, because I don't have the structure for it, but B, because I don't want to try and predict which of them's going to start in that game. I think Darwin should come in, but he was on the bench in the most recent pre-season friendly. He was benched again in game week 1. What does that mean? And they were all subbed off again after 70 minutes. Like that is just going to happen
Mm.
every game for those Liverpool forwards. So if you've got them, of course you play them and you don't sell them. But I'm not going in new on any Liverpool attacker that isn't Mo Salah. And I'm of course not doing that either.
I agree. Darwin, classic high XG chances, still lurking there. Jota played well. Diaz played really well. So yeah, where do you even go? It's like not even a sure spot. So I wouldn't
No,
go there for now. There
no.
is also the alternative question of if you have Salah, do you just play Salah and not captain him and captain Holland? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think we were saying I probably would still captain him. I just think Newcastle looked really good. Very impressed with them at the weekend. I don't think there'll be much in it. I would probably be on Salah, but as the deadline got closer, it would be a difficult one.
Mm.
The early sub is a little bit of a concern. Could it happen again? Like, could we see Salah coming off after 70 if they're, 3-0 up again with all the players that they've got? Potentially. I just I just think with the fixture you have to do it. If you've started with Salah and you've got to this point and you're not going to captain him, I just think having him in the first place was then the mistake.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. You
Cool.
got to commit to it. Mm.
Perfect. So we have not very long, but we will rattle through the final two. So Newcastle and then Aston Villa and then Brentford, but most importantly Spurs.
Okay. Why don't you begin with Newcastle?
Yeah, Newcastle are an interesting one. They were really good, and as we saw with them, as we saw at points last season, is they don't stop scoring goals. They don't go 2 or 3 goals up and think we're going to stop. They continue to put goals past people, and we saw that again. We saw that again in this one. It's worth bearing in mind when we put the fixture ticker there, they are like right down at the bottom. If you look at them over just the next 4 games, I think they actually are at the bottom. They have the hardest run of fixtures of any team in the league. Manchester City away, Liverpool at home, Brighton away, Brentford at home. Then, as soon as that difficult fixture run ends and they get to an easier fixture run, the Champions League starts straight away after game week 5. So that's what worries me with the likes of Isaac versus Wilson. They've signed enough wingers that I feel like they are going to play one up front now this season. They're going to play Isaac or they're going to play Wilson. And if that's the case, when that Champions League comes around, I feel like it's going to be so hard to predict which of them's going to play. So I think Isaac's the most transferred in player going into game week 2. Manchester City away this week, Liverpool, Brighton away. I think they'll score goals, but I'm not going to be buying. I don't think. I think there's enough other good options for me up front for them. And the same goes defensively, right? I don't see any clean sheets in those run of games for them either.
Yeah, it's a classic case of, I hope this is right, unstoppable force meets a immovable object type of situation
Yeah, yeah,
where it's a tough one to crack. I mean, Newcastle are so good. Top 4 team in the league. They're going to be competing against Man City no matter what. You can't just think of it as a easy game for Man City. It's going to be a difficult game for both teams. Maybe if you have Isaac, I know he's risen in price. Maybe you hop off him even. Like maybe you go to a Jackson or you go to, maybe a Jackson and kind of run away with the points you got in game week 1. But I just don't think you would buy them right now with the fixtures coming up, right?
no,
As you mentioned, I mean, why go there? But again, unstoppable force meets an immovable object. It's such a good team. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think they are great and their assets will be great. Harvey Barnes putting up big data in this one, but I mean, particularly with Man City away this weekend, like we're all bought Man City defenders for this season, expecting them to keep a lot of clean sheets early on. Newcastle at home is one of the games that we did think they could keep a clean sheet in. So I will not be buying for game week 2, and I probably will not be buying until about game week 5 or 6. But even then, I'm a bit worried about rotation, so it will likely only be the defenders that I look at when that comes around.
There is the alternative thinking that maybe these actually the tougher games open up for them potentially, and so potentially Isaac gets even more opportunities or more not more opportunities but better opportunities if they are able to catch
Yeah.
these teams on the counter. So if you're sitting with Isaac, there's a lot of things you can think about. But good job on getting those points initially.
I suppose the question is, are there any forwards that you would own now that you would consider selling to buy Isaac? Is there any situation you would be in that would want you to get Isaac? I'm just getting a list of forwards up.
Yeah, it's a good
Haaland, no.
question.
João Pedro, no. Watkins, no. Jackson, no. Darwin, of course, no.
Alvarez, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wissa, no.
Yeah, Wissa, the
So
problem with
no.
Wissa is came off too early.
Yeah. But I would probably hold him still if I had him.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
Cool.
I guess our consensus is one more week.
Yeah.
Hold him for one more week.
Cool. Villa, very, very briefly, they looked very good. And if you have Watkins or you have Diaby, I wouldn't worry too much about having them. The fixtures coming up are better for them. That we knew that Newcastle on the opening day was their hardest fixture. If you take that out, they're actually fifth best in the fixture ticker. Everton, Burnley, Crystal Palace in 3 of their next 4 as well. Defensively, of course, Tyrone Mings looks like he's going to be out for a while. It does boost the potential starting minutes of some of the other defenders. But yeah, I suppose that's the only other thing to consider is that without Mings, the likes of Pau Torres, the likes of Konza, probably going to play a lot of minutes now. But I don't see many people's main transfers at the moment being used on a 4.5 defender.
Let me give my 2 cents on Villa here, because shout out Roy Nish. Roy Nish says why Watkins no, he was disappointing. I watched this game. I thought Watkins and Diaby were fantastic. Maybe I'm blind, but or blinded by the 5-1 score or whatever, how dominant Newcastle were. But I thought they played really, really well. I thought Villa was fine until they started to get battered towards the end. But I thought Watkins and Diaby played perfectly fine. What I loved about Watkins is he really put in 100% effort right till the end. Right, as an FPL pick, that was very, potentially very good because they're already losing 4-1, 5-1. They've got like 30, 40 seconds left in the clock. And Watkins is asking for the ball. He wants the ball. He wants to keep attacking. He's still moving around. So, I think as a long-term hold, Harry, I'm very excited to own Watkins. I think he's like presenting himself as somewhat of a differential.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
Yeah. And Diaby, certainly on our watch list. I agree.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. He looked very good.
Very, very good.
But he does fall second not second, probably third in my list of 6.5 million mids, behind, of course, our man Brian Mbeumo, who got his penalty. He got his 7 points, I think. Nice start to the season for him. We'll talk mainly about Spurs, but Mbeumo looks like a great pick. He's on a lot of set pieces. We confirmed that he's on penalties as well. And they played a back 5, which was great for his positioning because he was very central. They won't do that every week, but I still think he'll be very involved in what they do. So big fan of him. If you need a cheap midfielder to buy into your teams, he's still top of the list for me.
Yeah. If there is ever a opportunity where we can double up on Aston Villa, Diaby Watkins is the one. I mean, they work so well off. I mean, we were talking about this last week, how Diaby just runs off Watkins, and they're both so energetic as well. So, yeah, Diaby certainly on my watch list as well.
Yeah, cool. So Spurs.
Let's do it.
Do you have?
Yeah. What are the key questions for Spurs?
So I suppose the key questions are: is Richarlison going to continue playing up front? Or do we just go Maddison? Because I still am sure that Son is too expensive at 9 million when Maddison is 7.5. And at the moment, Richarlison is playing up front at 7.
Yeah. So here's my read. I think Maddison's is a standout pick. I think Richarlison, we need more time. I wouldn't get blinded by the 7.0 price tag. Ainge needs to have a backup plan B, plan C type of thing. Because all of the previous episodes we've talked about how Udogie and Royale come inside. They're all centrally, they're all central. And then they pass the ball out wide to Son or Kulu where the attack begins. But Brentford came with the perfect counter plan, which was a 5-3-2, But essentially, Harry, it was like a 5-5. And what I mean by this is they have five at the back in a line. And then the
Yeah.
3 and 2, Wisa and Buemo are like a box in the middle. So I just picture a 5-5 type of situation in terms of their formation. So even if there's Son and Kulu out wide, there's always a man on them. So the perfect counter came against Spurs, which is why you saw a difficult time of them trying to form anything. The thing about Madison is his XG was quite low. It was his XA making up for his XGI. So that's one thing to watch. But that's very reassuring in the sense that even at a blocked out game, he had all set pieces. He was on corners. I mean, the only real creator in the team. We talk about how we want him to become the Ericsson of Spurs.
Yeah.
Richarlison, I mean, he just couldn't post up play. He's just not Harry Kane, right? He's not even 50% of Harry Kane at this moment in time. And when you're unable to do Ange's like number one tactics, then you need to feed the ball to Richarlison, who can post up and have runners around him. But he just wasn't good at holding up the ball either. So my hopes with him are low. I think that there's a potential that Perisic comes left, and Son potentially plays up top as well. But as even though he's my favorite player, I must say that he's not a good pick right now.
Perfect. I think I agree. Madison is the one that I really want, and I definitely wouldn't be buying Richarlison, particularly before the end of the transfer window, because with a large sum of money coming in for Harry Kane, it may be that they decide to spend some of it already on a replacement. So Madison definitely the one, 7.5. I think he may well be 7.6 come the next deadline by the looks of it. Yes. Yeah. So already on his way up.
Yeah. What excites me about Tottenham and Chelsea assets is their fixtures are about to turn, but they're also very attacking. So I want a piece of that attacking pie when I get the chance, which is why it's great we have Udogie and Chilwell in place. And then I look forward to potentially getting Maddison and Jackson next game week is what I'm looking at.
Cool. Okay, that's all the games.
That's all the games. Yep.
One left to play tonight, of course. So those with Marcus Rashford, Fernandes, anyone punted on Mason Mount, or defensively, I'm hoping for a nice clean sheet wipeout at some point in that game, but won't be too disheartened as long as there's some goals involved for the Manchester United duo. Yeah. Should we do our team and then a few questions?
Yeah, I agree. Before we go to the teams, once again, I must plug. Scout is doing 30% membership sales still, so please do sign up if you aren't a part of the Scout yet. Please do hit the like button, guys. It really helps us, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel. So thank you again for joining us today.
We just hit 1,000 live viewers as well. So thank you all very much for spending your Monday lunchtime watching us as well.
That's amazing. That is the FPL Harry effect, I believe. So,
right. Team for next week?
Let's do it. We're just going to present one team because... how do we tell you guys? Like, honestly, I didn't talk to Harry all of last week since we podded.
Actually didn't.
And we had different teams, during our pod. I also did a sort of team reveal where I got absolutely hammered by the comments. And then we end up having such a similar team that we don't even need to show both teams. We'll just do one team. I'm sure it'll change down the line, or we should at least try to make it different. Harry.
Yeah. Cool. So I've got Saliba and you have Gabriel. That's the only difference that we've got. It's a 3-5-2 again. It's the same starting lineup as last week, and I'm starting Turner over Pickford, and I'm captaining Erling Haaland. Vice captain will probably be on Bukayo Saka, but I'm pretty happy with it. The bench, Kabore has no fixture. Archer currently not in the Aston Villa squad because he's pushing for a move, and then Udogie. So my bench is weak. So hopefully everyone plays. But yeah, I'm pretty happy to roll the transfer this week.
Yeah, the only difference for me, again, is Gabriel. So I'll keep him, roll the transfer, more information over the weekend, and then make those fun 2 transfer, potentially 3 transfer move next game week. So looking forward to that. Kabore, I do want to say, as we mentioned, you will never play him, but he looked really good in that right wing back role. So
I am actually gonna play him.
Are you really?
in game week 6, he
Okay.
has Wolves at home, and all my other defenders have really difficult fixtures that week. So he will get on the team once in the first 10 game weeks.
Yeah. Good luck to you there, my friend. Okay, let's
Cool.
do some questions.
Yeah.
Start with the super chats.
Yes. Have you got those? Oh,
I believe there was 2, but I can't see the top one.
the top one just says, "I hate that my favorite FPL content creator is a Chelsea fan." Ah, well, gonna have to put up with me. I can't see the top one
Yeah, there was
either.
one more before that we should address.
If you've got YouTube Studio open, you should be able to flick. I'll go and do some others if you try and find it. If not, start Steele or Turner. I'm quite big on Turner. I think Nottingham Forest were pretty good game week 1. I was impressed with them. I thought Turner played pretty well, so I would probably start him over Steele. Play James or Saliba. James was pretty impressive. I'd probably still favour him. I think Palace were good. I think Palace will create chances at home to Arsenal. So I'll probably go with him.
Yeah.
Though a lot of the popular goalkeepers are being asked, would you play Turner over them in game week 2? So Onana, Johnston, Pickford, I would play Turner, and I'd probably play him over Steele as well.
Yeah. Okay, I got the questions.
Cool.
Thoughts on Cash plus Martinelli to Diaby plus Chilwell for -4.
Cash plus
Martinelli.
I don't think you need to do that this week.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can hold off and do it for 2 free transfers going into game week 3.
Mm-hmm.
My only thing is, if you have exact money in the bank, would I do it now? Selling.
Yeah, it is based on price drop. That's why he's considering it.
I don't think I'd want to take a -4 to do those transfers first week into the season. I would find another way to free up the money to get Chilwell next week, but I don't think I'd do it for a -4.
Yeah, because worst case scenario, you'll have a -4 next week, which could be 3 transfers, and that could be more fun to mess around with, or more beneficial to mess around with.
Yeah.
Best KDB replacement except Saka, Salah, Bruno, Rash.
Maddison. I think Maddison. I think I just go straight there. If I have De Bruyne now and I need something to do with him, I just go straight to Maddison. If you have those others, if you have Saka, Rashford, Salah, I just go Maddison.
Yeah. On Harry's answer, there's 2 ways to think of moves like this: is what player do I want the most, and another way I think is how can I be ahead of the template. And I foresee Maddison becoming a very popular transfer shortly.
Yeah.
Would you keep or sell Richarlison or get Maddison before it goes up? Definitely keep, right?
Yeah, you got to keep for just a little bit while more, because Maddison was great, but he didn't have the goal threat, and a lot of the assist threat was passing to Richarlison. So I still think I'd keep him.
Yep, agree.
One more.
Yep.
So let's have a look. Wissa, Jackson, or Diaby, if you had to bench one of these 3, Wissa away at Fulham, Jackson away at West Ham, and Diaby at home to Everton. I think I'd go Wissa, just because the minutes for him, and Fulham looked pretty good game week 1. I was surprised. They look quite good. So I'd definitely play Diaby at home to Everton.
I agree.
He's straight in there.
I thought you would say Jackson, surprisingly, but
no, Diaby's top, I think.
Oh, Diaby looks so good. Don't sleep on this Aston Villa team. It's that scoreline doesn't reflect how potentially great this team's going to be. Yeah.
Cool. So I'd bench Wissa, I think.
Yep, same.
Perfect.
Good, guys. Thank you so much for joining us again. Please do hit the like button. Please do subscribe to the Scout YouTube channel. Scoutcast will be tonight. and then some more videos throughout the week. So exciting stuff. I think all of us are off to a decent start. I wouldn't worry about the Saliba, Gabriel 4 points or 10 points, 15 points difference from the leaders. It is what it is. It's a marathon again. So I look forward to what more information we will have this coming game week, and next week should be fun. A lot of us will be going in different directions. So yeah. Any last words for you, Harry?
No, good luck those with players tonight, and we'll see you after game week 2.
See you guys. Thank you.